Hi everyone, we want to say a huge hello to everyone in the room and those tuning in online. It is a real honor and something that makes me personally really happy to have this many people, such a wonderful community all under one roof, and we're looking forward to many more events, so thank you so much.
Yeah, I'd just like to repeat what Liv said. Like, I think this is a really important conversation, and like, there's never been a time where it's more needed. My name's Athian, I'm 20. I do history at university, amongst some other things, and I'm the young trustee for BEO. And I'm really privileged to be doing this with Liv. Shout out, Liv.
Thanks, Athian. I'm Liv, and I'll be co-hosting with the wonderful Athian today. I'm a creative strategist, writer, and change maker with the Advocacy Academy. Lee already mentioned, but an amazing organization where I'm able to facilitate social justice training and workshops around topics such as race, abolition, community care. Again, definitely check them out. We're doing some amazing work. We have amazing campaigns, great young people, but you'll hear more about that later. I'm also co-founder of Legally Black UK, a campaign which drew attention to representation of black people in the media, particularly British media, and was previously a trustee on a youth advisor to Paul Hamlin Foundation's Act for Change Fund, which distributed grants to social action, youth-led organizations around the UK. So we're really excited to be here today.
The first part of this is going to be a panel with two really important voices and actors in the pursuit of racial justice in the UK right now. So the first person is Lee Jasper, a politician and race relations activist. Lee is a policy and organizational development consultant, Chair Alliance for Police Accountability Steering Group, co-founder of Operation Black Vote, the BARAC UK, Black Sock. He's a member of he's a strategic advisor for Black Men for Change and Black Impact. Black board, I slept for 5 hours, my apologies. Board member for Youth Futures, the vice chair of BAME Lawyers for Justice, and the chair of the Lambeth Youth Safety Board. That's a really heavy resume. Can we get a round of applause for Lee Jasper?
And we are also joined by Chantel Lunn, a black writer, presenter, educator, and activist based in Liverpool. She founded the Merseyside BLM movement and Merseyside Alliance for Racial Equity, CIC, while studying at university. Chantel has an MA in Criminology and Social Policies from LJMU. As an educator, she specializes in the experience of children in care, policing, and black history. She's a regular contributor to activist events in London and across the UK with organisations such as BLM UK, Kill the Bill, and Extinction Rebellion. So please put a big round of applause together for Chantel.
We're like in the backdrop of really unprecedented times. Like, it's unprecedented times, but that's the new normal. And this is in the context of existential climate change, rising economic inequalities, declining civil liberties, and a general state where it's undeniable that things cannot proceed the way they are.
But I also want to draw attention to the fact that we're in really hopeful times. We are able to easily connect with each other more than ever across seas, across the entire UK. We have more and more people doing grassroots work all the time, everywhere. And so on that note, Lee, in your experience and your long history of work, what challenges do you foresee for the next generation of young leaders?
Well, thank you, and great opening to the meeting, so thanks. You give them a round of applause again, please. I think delighted to have intergenerational discussions. Look, young people in the 21st century face the most existential challenge ever faced by humanity, period. The climate crisis, is one that threatens extinction not just of biodiversity, but of humanity itself. And so you can think of no greater urgency or a priority than the savior of the planet and humanity. Alas, that is the world we bequeath to you, and the task before you is to make sure that you do all that's necessary to avoid the calamity which is already unfolding and costing millions of lives of African, Caribbean, and Asian people in the global south on a daily basis. So the challenge ahead is humongous, the largest ever faced in human history. And it will be the mission and the destiny of this generation to force the end of carbon growth economies. The challenge of saying to places like Great Britain and America, you can no longer afford unrestrained, unlimited growth, that you have to have managed decline in order that the global south can develop sustainability and a green economy to feed and clothe and house the billions of people out there. So I cannot underestimate the challenge that is ahead of you. And of course, along with the global economic crisis, the global climate crisis, there's an economic crisis all over the world. And you're seeing that play out on continents amongst poor people rising up against their governments. So these are incredibly difficult times. The challenges are huge, but I think the optimum lies is that when young people and communities and nations and the planet come together, as we did for climate change, as we did for Black Lives Matter, we can move the dial forward together. So I'm here to help and advise, but you guys are going to have to do the heavy lifting and the hard work.
I think that's a really good answer. Like, the way that the climate crisis is manifesting is that it's exposing every single inequality that exists in society, and often those who have historically contributed the least are paying the highest cost. And it's not like something that's coming in the future, it's right here today. And kind of continuing on from what Lee said, we're here with Chantel, who is someone who is leading that wave of the next generation of Black British activists. What do you feel like, in the face of all these existential problems, that it is better, that is needed to better equip our generation to face up to these really difficult issues?
I think in terms of our generation or the younger generation or the next generation or the generation coming up in terms of activism, what we need is what a lot of people within the white community get. It's that leg up that the generation before them leaves. But quite often that leg up for us is passing on knowledge, passing on connections, passing on that network and kind of making the table wider. And something that we often battle with within our community is, and it's part of the colonial legacy, is like a scarcity mindset. And we kind of got backed into that corner of, well, we're only going to have one position for one Black person. And then what they do is they end up putting us in a position where we're competing with each other within our community. And what we really need to be doing is fighting to make that table bigger and saying, well, actually, no, we're not going to accept that one seat at the table. We're going to make the table wider. And it's something that I've battled with throughout my activism. Like when I was coming up as an activist, there were people kind of saying, no, you can't be in this space because this is my space. But then equally, there were people who literally were taking me in the kitchens and going, this is what you need to know if you're going to be in this space. This is how you get around the table with decision makers. This is how you access funds. And these are the tools that you need to be successful in your endeavours. And kind of we need more of that. But then equally, as someone who does campaign up and down the UK, you know, everywhere from Northern Ireland right up to London, right up to Cornwall, I go all over the UK. And everyone, just as America, we could consider America a little bit ahead in the conversation around civil rights. They've got a few more policies. They've made a little bit more progress with the police. London's ahead of places like Liverpool, is ahead of places like Northern Ireland. So geographically, we need to be connecting and sharing that knowledge. Because quite often, once you step outside of London, and like I'm in London all the time, I've got family in London, it's really diverse, but like places like Liverpool, there's less than 1% of Black people in the area that I live, so it's really isolating, and it's kind of nice to feel that you've got that community support. And with technology being what it is, we can have that sense of community support without even needing to be in a room with each other, and that was something that really carried me in my activism, like especially linking up with Black people in the countryside, in places like Sandbach, right in rural areas, who could sort of empathise with that feeling of isolation, that you're fighting for your right, but there aren't that many people in the area who look like you, and quite often you're being gaslit because there's only you and there's only your voice. So I feel like that geographical connection too. And also, my final one would be keep the Black agenda on the agenda. Like I make no qualms about it. I've got a Black agenda. I want to advance my community. I'm fighting for my community. But quite often people will shy away from that a little bit and kind of not want to call it what it is, but hold each other to account. So when people are getting in positions, getting in rooms, like me and my friends, we have a little group chat, and it's kind of just to hold each other to account as activists. Okay, remember what we set out to do 3 years ago? have we still got that firmly at the front of our minds? Are we still fighting for that? And I feel like holding each other to account within your peer group is a really powerful act. So there's loads of challenges facing us, but I feel like we're better equipped in terms of connectivity, in terms of the networks that we created in 2020 to push forward and to drive forward and to have those big conversations to get us where we need to be.
Chantal, thank you so much for that. Like, I feel like in everything that you're saying, what shines through is community. Like, you want people around you who understand what you're going through, who can fight for the same things, who can advocate for you, and who are also going to hold you to account. And I think this room and this conversation is a big, is indicative of that need for community. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but the main thing that we need as young people is to really center community in all of our work. So yeah, thank you so much. That was beautiful.
We're getting bars today, like, guys, come on. Let's give some energy. Come on, like, we're actually really trying to transform the world. Like, it's falling apart. We're getting some really amazing bars from everyone on the panel. So as like was just demonstrated, there's an enormous amount of care for social justice. As we see that often like demonstrated in the sparks for justice after high-profile incidents. A couple months ago, after the news came out about the Child Q incident, this room was full of young people who had just turned up after spending a long day at school, and they were here talking about what needs to happen for the next generation of young black people. There were kids who were as young as 12, so there is that energy. But rarely does that emerge into like a more sustained fight. And undoubtedly, the harsh conditions that we are living in, the rising bills and falling wages, answering never-ending emails and schoolwork and university work, the collapse of the NHS, people trying to get a hospital appointment.
Everything that Athian just said and that Lee mentioned before all informs all of that. And I think there's some useful context to this question. When Athian and I were trying to come up with this question, originally it was around burnout and how do we keep kind of pushing through that, and what advice do you have to work through that? And I think Athian and I were both like, the reality is a reality. This is the world that we live in. There is like, people have got shit to do. There's just shit happening every single day that's thrown at you. And so for us, we were like, the most important thing, and I think kind of comes back to what you were saying, Chantal, about community. For us, it's like, evidence again by this room, there are grassroots organizations, there are individuals working all the day, all the time, every day, all the time, every day, pushing through all of that. And so for us, we're kind of like in that fight and in that journey towards justice. How do you think we elevate the profile of this work and mobilize into a larger collective? Either of you can go first.
Well, I think that to elevate the work, we need two things. One, we need to get some ethical practice into our black leadership. It's missing. You know, there are people of my age group, there are people slightly younger or a lot younger. But I think that, you know, there's an assumption that all my skin folk are my kinfolk, right? So me and you the same, so you're going to say the same agenda with me. And I'm going to get disappointed when you don't adopt my radical agenda, and then I'm going to start to, you know, feel bad. So I think that ethical leadership in the black community is critical, because what makes us weak are these dysfunctions in our leadership. And these dysfunctions in our leadership can be men, in terms of misogyny. It can be all sorts of issues in relation to, you know, bullying, intimidation, harassment. We have some bad practices within our ethical leadership that we need to eradicate if we're to build the kind of critical mass consensus that we need to take on the powers that be. But I also think that working internationally, to stretching out our hand, you know, we're in Britain, now isolated from the rest of Europe. We are the most international community based here, one of the most international. And so we can make links with the African continent, with African Americans, with African diasporas in Brazil, in Australia and others, to have the conversations we began under lockdown, because we were forced to use the new technology to build all sorts of new exciting alliances, particularly with those on the African continent, struggling against climate change, struggling against corrupt elites who are fleecing, you know, government treasuries to fill Swiss bank accounts, struggling with the geopolitics of, you know, the USA and Russia as it plays out on the African continent. So we've got huge opportunity. Internationalism is in the way. But if the British black community is going to feel what I think is its destiny, just like the African American community did in making world history, it has to have at its core an ethical, principled leadership that is accountable, whose word is its bond, who can be trusted, and are not playing the kind of dysfunctional ego politics that are so besetted and bedeviled previous generations, including my own, in terms of getting greater black unity.
Amazing. Everything Lee said, I'm only messing, and I'll add a few bits, but I think shared solidarity is such an important one. The one big difference between this wave of the black civil rights movement, and that's all BLM is. BLM is a wave of a civil rights movement that has been spanning generations and more. The one big difference is white people woke up and were like, hang on a minute, something's happening. And they only woke up because we were at a moment in time where there was nowhere else to go, nothing else to do, but to look at that telly and see what was happening. But it created a solidarity that, despite the many attempts of government, they have not been able to break that solidarity. And that has given us power within this movement to drive forward and to stand shoulder to shoulder with other movements, with the LGBTQ community, with feminist communities, with the working class, the unions, all of that, to stand shoulder to shoulder and push forward for what we're fighting for. But to come back to the black agenda, we have to ensure that that remains a part of these movements, because there's a lot of activism. I've never seen as much activism happening as I've seen now. You know, there's climate activism, there's unions, there's loads of stuff out there, but quite often, once you go into those other sections, you don't see as many black people, you don't see as much diversity, and we kind of have to walk into those rooms. And I sit in rooms with, you know, union rooms surrounded by middle-aged white men, because I want to make sure that when the meetings are happening, our needs are being met, and what our community needs is on that agenda within their meetings. So it's kind of continuing that solidarity, but also, and something that I always bring up, and they hate it because they said it to me, they made promises. I'm like, don't forget the commitment you made to our groups in 2020. They made commitments to us in 2020, and I never let them forget it, because that's the only way to progress. But also we need a global outlook. You know, we've mentioned the climate crisis, absolutely appalling, and it's hitting our people first. The African continent, most of it will be underwater in 50 years. We need to ensure that even within England, we've got a level of privilege. We've got a voice that other people don't have. Some of the things that we can say here, other people have been in prison for, shot for. So we need to use our privilege to fight, because hundreds of years ago, our ancestors were dying for the things that we can say now. It doesn't mean we've got there, but it means that we've got somewhere along the way, and we have to continue to push forward, especially around policing. You knew I couldn't go 5 minutes without mentioning policing, especially around policing. Because at a policy level, although our communities have come together and we've built these networks and we've built these organisations, at a policy level, if we look at things like policing, not much has changed. Not much has changed at all. And we need to keep pushing till we see those changes at a policy level in the places that we need them. The level of stillbirths for black mothers have remained the same since 2019. The level of young black boys being stop and search have remained the same, if not gotten worse. And we need to keep on revisiting those numbers, revisiting where we're at, and saying we're not stopping, we're not giving up, we're going to keep on pushing. But a big part of that is we are 3 years down the line. Has anyone burnt out recently? Yeah, we burn out, we get tired. Self-care, radical self-care is so important. It's so important to prioritise ourselves. We know what the mental health statistics are like for our people. We know that we're less likely to get access to mental health services. And if we do, it's usually through a criminal justice pathway. We need to radically and unapologetically make that time and embed it within our movements, so that we are saying, right, society and those systems might not care for us, but we're going to care for one another. We're going to look out for one another.
Thank you so much, Chantal. I feel like you mentioned so many issues there, and I think like every single one of those things that Chantal mentioned is a black issue. We have black LGBTQ plus people. We have black people with mental health issues. We have black people who are being actively affected by climate change every single day. So every single one of those things you mentioned is important. And again, like you said, solidarity through all of that and radical self-care. So again, just to highlight everything that Chantal said, take notes. Okay, the final question for you both is, what is giving you hope for the possibilities of the future of activism? I feel like we've spoken about lots of issues, things that are affecting us every single day. We've touched on kind of what we'd like to see and how we kind of could mobilize to get there, but I want to kind of end on like not a high note, but I think hope is a really important thing. It's not a strategy, but it's a really important thing to kind of leave people with. So what is giving you hope for the future of activism and the possibilities of that?
I think, personally, I've got hope in humanity, because I believe that when humanity comes together, it can do absolutely incredible, fabulous things that change world history. And sometimes in world history, we've seen that it only takes a few committed people to change global history. You know, maybe Fidel Castro's revolution of, a handful of guerrillas in Cuba is an example. But there are equally other examples on the African continent of communities coming together and working to change world history. So I think that our faith in humanity's ability to get to do the right thing, although, some may have more cynicism than that. But I also have great hope because of you guys. Because what I see amongst young people is a kind of consciousness and a compassion and an emotional intelligence and an empathy that certainly wasn't around when I was your age. And I commend you for it, because I think it's the very skills and attributes you will need to take on these really incredible seismic challenges. And the one thing would give me greater hope is to follow up what Chantal said, which is self-care. If you think stepping into the black leadership space is a walk in the park, and you're doing it properly, there are people in this room whose mental health, economies, futures have been scarred by their sacrifice to the struggle. And it's important as a community, we have the kind of black leadership support mechanisms that are there to hold those up who the system would otherwise knock down. And if we can have that, your commitment, your intelligence, your vibrant articulations, I'm sure the world is going to be in safe hands.
I'd say since 2020, the way things have progressed in terms of conversations and the spaces that have been made, that we have made for our community, and the way our community has moved has given me hope. 3 years ago, the stuff I was saying about the police, I was literally called a radical, anti-police, all of these things. And I used to be a police officer, got labelled all of these things. Our community have led conversations in this country about policing that we weren't having, that weren't getting out into the mainstream media, and that weren't allowed to get out into the mainstream media. It was like you could not criticise the police publicly. We've been having them in our communities for years, but they were never getting out there. And over the past 3 years, we've seen our communities push and build networks and use social media and just push and push and push until those conversations were allowed out in mainstream discourse. The things that I was getting called radical and, don't listen to it for, I'm now being invited into universities and onto television to say it on morning shows. You'd never be able to say that stuff. And that's not by accident. That's because of what we've been doing as a community, because we have not sat down, we have not been quiet, and we've not stopped using our outdoor voices. And one of the absolute privileges of my life is to work at a grassroots level. Like yesterday, I was in Moss Side bringing a play about stop and search to the community, to young people, and the young people just talking to us afterwards, saying what the play meant to them, and the fact that that play was given space within the community centre, led by almost a complete black cast. What is that going to do? I don't know, because I didn't have that when I was younger. We don't know what we're creating now because no one's done it yet. Some of the spaces that have been made, we've not had them before, and that gives me hope. Because a lot of the things that I say, I wish I'd seen that when I was a kid. There's someone out there from our community doing it right now, making that space and pushing forward. And that gives me hope, because I feel like magic is happening now, and I know it's hard, and I know we're not where we need to be, but we're a lot further away from where we were, and we are getting there day by day, and every one of us is pushing, and that's what we need. Everyone in this room is pushing, everyone in this room is fighting, and that's what we need to continue doing. So I feel hopeful. I don't feel hopeful when I look right up in Parliament, but when I look at a grassroots level and I look at people in this room, I feel hopeful.
I want to say a huge thank you. Please, another round of applause for Leah and Chantal. We just want to emphasize that this is the start of a wider initiative to develop a framework for discussions like these. We want further collaboration, we want support across movements, and like Chantal was saying, we want to continue building stuff that... Does anyone have any questions for Lee and Chantal? I can invite them back. We have a roving mic coming. Okay. Yeah, if I could just have one here.
Sorry? You guys come back. You guys come back. Sorry.
Apologies.
Is this the introduction to the APA, I think?
It's questions. And there were 2 sections.
Oh, okay, sorry, I thought we were done.
I thought we were done, sorry guys.
Hello, thank you so much for that. Should I stand or? Yeah. My name's Athena, and I just came to hear about fellow young people's vision and your hopes and your fears and your dreams. And I think the climate crisis, the fact that you touched on that first was so pertinent. And I just really wanted to ask about Extinction Rebellion as a space. I've been on the fence about joining in with them because there seems to be quite a big class divide and a big sort of race divide in terms of the people who are at the forefront of that movement. In terms of your experience with Extinction Rebellion, have you sort of felt that their methods, especially with provoking the police as a black person, do you feel like the sort of angle that they're taking is safe for us to be involved with? Or how do you recommend we as black people still advocate for our communities but protect ourselves at the same time? Because, yeah, I just wanted to know what your experiences with Extinction Rebellion were.
Well, certainly from the social movement I represent, Black Sox, we took the challenge to the environmental movement that their movement was too white, it was too dangerous in terms of putting black people in vulnerable positions, and they hadn't properly considered the black experience in developing and in climate change movement. And so Black Sox formed an anti-racist allyship agreement with the environmental movement, XR and Just Stop Oil, and that anti-racist allyship agreement is our standard model agreement for all relationship with white organizations. We don't just simply join up with white organizations without thinking through a strategic framework and setting some political priorities about what that change should look like. And we've got XR, Rebellion and JSO to agree on a vulnerability framework, which means they do not put black people in harm's way in terms of their radical action for civil disobedience. And we're working with them as a group to work through the implementation of this anti-racist allyship agreement, which we will hopefully fundamentally provide a safe space for black activists to get into the XR Rebellion. But they have had a tough time, and they failed previously to respond to black issues adequately, hence the anti-racist allyship agreement.
Yeah, I've protested a few times with XR and attended a few of their events, and Just Stop Oil, and I've been to climate camp. Yeah, I'm proper in with climate movement. But what Lee's saying is absolutely right. It's an ongoing conversation about what I would call the glamorization of arrest. And what I often say is an arrest for a white middle class person is completely different for an arrest to a black person. So we need to establish that from the get-go. They are, as Lee said, they're making headway. They know what the problem is. It's been mentioned loudly. I'm not going to say it's perfect because I don't want anyone to think that walking in there is going to be perfect. But what I do, my general conversations that I have you done a risk assessment? Does your risk assessment include who your vulnerable community members are and who's more likely? So if I go to a protest, I'm on a million police list, the police instantly make a beeline for me and they try everything they can to arrest me throughout that protest. People around me need to know that. Now, I've been on some protests, including with Extinction Rebellion, where people know that, so they will intercept to stop the police from being able to get to me. But it's kind of a conversation before I attend a protest, and I'll also say, what kind of a protest is this? Is this a protest I can bring my kids to? Is this a protest where there's a likelihood of arrest, or where any of the aims are to be arrested? Because if that's the protest, then I'm not coming, because I don't want to be arrested. I've got kids. And I kind of lay out my stall really early days and encourage them. If they're putting, so for instance, if it's sitting on a piece of land and potentially you're going to be moved on from the land and it's an illegal occupation, but on social media they've not advertised it as an illegal occupation, they've just advertised it. And this isn't Extinction Rebellion, this is just general climate justice movements that can sometimes do this. They've not advertised it as an illegal occupation, but a gathering. Then I will really scrutinise that language and say, has this been risk assessed? What is the process? And are there any risks to anybody going on that land? So quite often, if someone asks me to attend something, I will go through my own risk assessment based on the vulnerabilities and the kinds of risks to our community. But the XR are getting better with it. As you say, Just Stop Oil have joined in and sort of signed up. So it's something that's an ongoing conversation, but I know XR at the beginning of the year announced that they're changing their activism strategy so that it is more inclusive, and essentially the aim is not to be arrested but to act within the law so that people can be involved in climate justice activism, because in my opinion it's another form of excluding black people. We've pushed the climate justice conversation forward so much, and for me to get to the point where it's either you're willing to get arrested or you can't come along, that's really problematic, and that's another way of kind of gatekeeping climate justice space. So it's an ongoing conversation. It is getting better, but I'm not going to make any promises that it's perfect yet.
Can I ask a question back? This might be a bit of a mad one, but let's run with it. Basically, I think that so I'm like a historian in an academic sense-ish. I'm in my first year, but there's a lot of examples where the kind of direct action in terms of disruption that these groups are doing has the capacity to shift things. The issue is, of course, as black people, there is an element of exclusion. And I'm not saying I have a particular strong opinion, but I just want to ask, how do we reconcile the fact that this form of protesting that they're doing can be effective with the fact that we're the most impacted community, with the fact that there's these difficult things around us not being able to be arrested? It's like, what do you think the model can be for young black people being involved in the climate movement? Because there's a lot of care, but how do you think, where could we fit in?
Okay, so I'll give an example of that. Climate Camp Scotland. There were different levels that you could get involved with. There's places for everyone to get involved in activism. It's not like get arrested or don't get involved. Activism needs people. But with Climate Camp Scotland, what I liked about them was everything. So it was like a camp on a piece of land that some oil company was going to destroy it, as they do. And it was family friendly, but then for every action that we were going to, before we went to the action, it was arrestable, I'm not here to judge protests or to say, don't do it this way, because it is effective, but we have to accept that not everyone comes to a protest to be arrested. So what they did was they said, we're going to go to this protest. At this point, if you do not want to get arrested, you don't want to come to the next point, stay on the curb. So they sort of drew a map of where the process was going to amp up a little bit. So if you're okay to be arrested, you cross this road with us. But if you don't want to, stay on this side of the road. But you stay on the road and you still keep the pressure up. So they sort of gave people, if you're on a run and you get an exit route, if you want to get off a little bit early and do a 5K instead of a 10K, they gave people exit routes for if you wanted to go the whole way or not. But I do agree, listen, if someone wants to get arrested all day long, I'll support you. But we have to make it clear what people are signing up for and be real, put that small print in large print all over social media so people know.
I think that the vulnerability framework that we've given to Just Stop Oil and XR is exactly this kind of mechanism of protecting young black people from the predations of the state. But let's be clear, the tactic they're using is our tactic. It is a civil rights tactic. It was a tactic that Reverend Sharpton will tell you about when he arrives. It's the tactics of King. It's the tactics of Gandhi. It's the tactics of willful, deliberate civil disobedience in a non-violent way that has shifted the dial. The problem is for us, unless we have the resilience backup, the lawyers, the money to get bail, the money to feed families whose mum or adult may be detained on bail in jail for 6 weeks, who's going to provide the family with some resources. It is irresponsible to do a solo superstar black action and get your backside arrested and then you're in jail and there is no wider movement to provide you with the kind of legal, welfare, cultural, mental health support you need to sustain your resilience in that struggle. And until we've got the systemic processes of support, which white people have by virtue of white privilege, when a white middle class kid goes in front of that judge, they recognize each other. And they say, you know what, you've been rather silly, you should go home to listen to your parents. When they see us, it's like, yo, you're that and you're going to go to jail. So we need to understand where we are. But in order for us to escalate to civil disobedience, and I think it's a valid tactic, wisely chosen, it can only be done so if you have the full panoply of support, welfare, legal and financial services behind you.
Hello. Hey. My name is Great Okusun. I'm the ambassador for the Open Minds Alliance, project lead for Stop and Search for the Account Group, and a myriad of other mildly useless titles. So I have a few points that I wanted to ask questions about. I'll start off with this. You both talked about efficacy and understanding within the Black community, but also from my experience within the Black activist community, efficacy and activism seems to come second to the cult of individualism, in which a person can care about the needs of the project or even the needs of their own personal goals instead of the well-being and mindset of those within the team. Another one is the delusion that the pushing of activists back from the civil rights movements in America and within the UK to even now have really made that much of a change without the need of external disaster that brings a global response from all corners. Rodney King was a major one for the USA. Rodney King, Martin Luther King's assassination, or the assassinations of Black civil rights leaders. And over here, there's been, well, myriads, like the brother from Hamilton. Yes, that's that brother. Rashawn Charles, a brother from my own borough. And what that sister is saying over there, because I'm not good with names, I've never have been. So with all of that, why is there a constant, consistent fallacy within the community and even brought up by yourselves that these things are purely through the ideals and constant delusional pushing from activists who have done nothing to really, innovate their tactics since the early noughts? And what makes, and also what makes it valid for anyone to hear what these people say, including yourselves, when matters regarding the Black community are usually monopolized by actors like yourselves to speak for the Black community without ever really spreading the net for people who have a better understanding to go forward. That's all I want to say.
So I think it was a huge question. I'm going to come in at the end point if that's cool, but I don't think individualism's the way to go. Like, I'm sat here not because I think I'm anything special or like any great like representative of everyone. I don't think there's a single representative of the Black community, and I think it's very dangerous to say that. But I agree with the point that I don't think that we should, and this is when we put all our eggs in the baskets of an individual, what they tend to do is come and attack that individual. Look at Jeremy Corbyn, look at Martin Luther, for example. They come for that individual. Every single one of us, there's no hierarchy, and there shouldn't be a hierarchy, and that's where we get into this issue. The voice of the cleaner should be as equal as the voice of the CEO. Everyone's voice has power, and everyone's voice has merit, and it needs to be about the collective, not the individual. And I think individualism it can be very dangerous, because at the end of the day, we know what happens when people get held up on a pedestal, but it's not about an individual, it's about a movement, it's about a community. But I will say this about activists: a lot of activists are in this space because of their experiences at a community level. So I'm in this space because I grew up in care. I'm in this space because I experienced institutional racism. I'm in this space because I'm working through trauma. And that's the other thing about self-care. A lot of people in activist spaces, I've had conversations today, are working through their own personal trauma. And that's why, as movements and collective, we need to really push down on self-care and really sow that into movements, because sometimes even me, I have to say, am I an activist in this space, or am I just working blindly through my trauma? Which hat am I wearing? But I don't think movement should be about individuals, but I do think protest has a powerful role to play. To this day, nothing has got the job done like people getting out on the street and fighting. And that's because, you know, people say go through the systems. The amount of times I've been told go through the proper channels, sign a petition. The people who tell me this know that they have control over the proper channels, and they know if I go through the proper channels, I won't get anything done. We get 10 times more done through protests. George Floyd would never have got justice if it wasn't for thousands of people taken to the streets. Laws would not have changed in my city, Liverpool, if it wasn't for the toxic uprisings and the black community saying we are not putting up with it anymore. Laws actually changed because of that. Police practice actually changed because of that. It didn't change enough. We've not got enough of what we need. But progress gets made when we go out on the street. But that's not the only part of it. It's not just like go to a protest and then go home, job's done. It's go to a protest and then get out in the community and then do education and then sit around the table and then do everything within your power. So activism, quite often as an activist, people see a picture of you with a megaphone and they think that's activism. That's like 1% of activism. Activism is literally sending emails till 5 o'clock in the morning, sitting in meetings with people who don't even let you speak because you're not the same colour as them, but persisting because you need this change. Activism is all that stuff that people don't see, but the biggest part of activism is the community and the people behind the movements and the people who stand at every point in a protest. There shouldn't be a hierarchy of voices. Everyone's voice is important and everyone's story should be told.
Yeah. Look, I think the nature of black leadership is that people who've been traumatized by racism are attracted to black leadership positions because they think that that will help in relation to tackling the broader issue. But also because black leadership is stereotyped and assumed to be, you know, this high-profile thing with lots of press and media, and it's all appealing and a walk in the park, a lot of people with trauma are attracted, like moths to a flame, to activism as a means of self-therapeuticizing their own trauma. So they come into the movement dysfunctional from their trauma, and they prosecute their trauma through their leadership. And because they're not trauma-informed or aware, they end up then, fulfilling the sort of trope of black leadership that we all know too well. Oh, people can't get on. You know, once again, black people fail. Yada yada yada. And what I found in my experience for a long time, and this is why self-care is so important, is that public acclaim attracts traumatized individuals who, if you do not check that out and have some sort of filter that allows you to check who is deeply traumatized, then what you have is traumatized, dysfunctional leadership in the black leadership space. And without any self-care or support, that can be incredibly dangerous.
Hello, my name's Paul. I'm profoundly deaf, a sign language user. I live right here in London, and I'd like to ask you a question. You were talking about Just Stop Oil and the XR movements, and you linked a lot of what was happening to some of the stuff that happened around George Floyd, stuff that we don't probably need to recover right now. The massive impact that those demonstrations that followed that lynching were so impactful that it felt like that it was a moment that really unified internationally the black communities, people of colour community around the world. And that conversation that started, it felt like it started in a way where we had been ignored for so long. For years and years and years. I know it's not a conversation that had ever gone away, but our voices had become so quiet. I was really interested, I know this is a slightly roundabout way of going at it, I was really interested in the way you highlighted risks for black people in terms of demonstrating, when George Floyd was murdered in that way, we didn't feel the fear of going out onto the streets to demonstrate that. So I'm just interested in the point that you make about XR and Just Stop Oil. Aren't we in a position to be able to make those decisions about risk for ourselves and how that kind of affects us? I just was curious to know about, you know, just if you could just add some clarity to that for me. I'm just interested to drill down into that a bit more.
Absolutely. And thank you for that question. I think it's about giving people the option to decide if they want to take that risk. So I'm not saying don't take the risk. Like, I've been to protests where, like, most of the time I try not to get arrested, but there's been a few where I've set everything up and gone, if I get arrested at this one, then so be it, I'm not bothered. Mainly around the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act and the Public Order Act, which essentially are making all forms of protest illegal now. So, like, everything from standing on the street with a megaphone, you could have up to 10 years in prison. So while a lot of us try not to get arrested, some of us don't mind, and some of us are in it at that end. And, like, again, we don't want to be creating this discourse of good versus bad activism where some activists are kind of looking down on the ones who want to be arrested. But I think what it should be is informed consent. So I don't like it when organisations don't make it clear that this is a process where you could potentially be arrested. And I think, as with the example of Climate Camp Scotland, make it clear to people what could happen by coming on this process. Make it clear to people if they can bring their children. Make it clear to people if this process is an accessible process. And then let them make their own decisions about that. Because there are people who are, like, happy to go as far as it needs be. And good on them. Do you know what? If they want to do that, good on them. But then also there's people... I was at a protest where someone was going through... didn't have leave to remain yet, so they were going through immigration, and they were terrified because they weren't sure if they were going to be arrested and what that would mean for the, you know, for the citizenship. So it's important to understand, you know, the nuances within our communities and the lived experiences, and to give people all of the information that they need so that they can make that decision for themselves. But no, it's definitely not a case of, oh, if you can get arrested at a protest, you shouldn't go. But if it's a protest where you could get arrested, that should be made clear from the get-go, and we should be considering who we're inviting to our protest and what attending that protest could mean to them.
Don't need to add.
Lee doesn't want to add in. Was that all right, Paul? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I think we've had, like, a really meaningful and lively debate about... I hate the word debate. We've had a really amazing discussion about how we can reconcile our different perspectives and our awareness that things are falling apart. But in the midst of things falling apart, we're really privileged to have people like Lee and Chantel who are at the forefront of providing our community and our society with all the alternative visions that we need for the future. And then essentially, we're going to be taking a break before the second half when we're going to hear from Reverend Sharpton, and we're going to be lucky enough to hear from a young person who's also putting forward an alternative vision, but through spoken word and poetry, Yolanda Lear, who'll be reading some live poetry for us. And we're going to hear, sorry, 5 hours sleep. Don't sleep for 5 hours. We're going to hear a bit more about one of the organizations which has brought today to life.
Okay, we're gonna hear a little bit about BEO and TAA. We'll be having a short break. There will be some spoken poetry. Rev Al Sharpton will then come back. Please be seated again by 7:25.
Was that cool? Yeah. I didn't like XR too much, did I? I didn't want to be defending them though, because I was like, it's true, do you know what I mean? What happened? Was it not on the agenda? Yeah. Yeah. I said, we're going to have a short break.
Okay, guys, so we're going to have a 10-minute break. Time to go to the toilet, think if there's any left, and then we're going to reconvene in 10 minutes. 10 minutes for some spoken word, and you'll hear a little bit more about some of the organisations involved. Thank you. To start the second half of tonight's proceedings. How has the first half gone, people? Can I hear? Hey, excellent. Excellent. Some really riveting conversation. So, can we have some quiet now, please? We are live streaming now to thousands online. So, as I promised, can we have quiet, please? Can we have quiet, please? Quiet, please, at the back. So we really hope you enjoyed the first session, as I said earlier. I'm Jake Ferguson, one of the organisers from Black Equity Organisation. So before we introduce your main speaker for tonight, and we know who he is, as great as that legend is, we're just going to have a few words from a couple of people. So I'm firstly going to introduce Foppe, who, as I mentioned earlier, is from the Advocacy Academy. The Advocacy Academy is an important South London-based but national organisation that supports young black and brown activists. So can we give Foppe a big round of applause, please?
Hi everyone, can everyone hear me? Thank you. My name is Foppe and I am a Pledge Education and Campaigns Lead and I work for the Advocacy Academy. And I want to say a big thank you to Jake and the Black Equity Organisation for letting us collaborate with this event. So the Advocacy Academy, who are we? We are a youth organising movement based in South London, specifically Brixton, and we work with 16 to 25-year-old young people on how to harness power and build change they want to see. There's something our CEO says a lot: our kids don't do bake sales. They actively go out into Parliament speaking truth to power. Liv is one of our alumni. We have a flagship program, which is 600 hours of intensive program where they learn about social justice. It's called the School of Social Justice. We teach them what power is. We teach them what classism is. We teach them what racism is. We teach them what does it mean to negotiate power. What happens after you've got the photo op? How do you get into the room with the people who make actual decisions? And it's after that they send them off into the world and they develop campaigns. Over the last 6 months, I've worked with new alumni of the advocacy program. And they've done amazing campaigns on like tackling gentrification in Brixton, addressing gender discrimination in school. What does it mean to make sure that hair discrimination is rooted out of all of our schools in South London? And one of the most amazing ones is trying to create a regeneration charter for people in Brixton and getting people in the community to actually talk about what does it mean to live in a community that is trying to root you out. I'm incredibly honored to work with these young people, some of which their wins have been incredibly bold and loud. We've had young people win over millions of pounds to build 31 affordable houses in Lambeth. We've had the Halo Code, which is a campaign aimed at tackling hair discrimination across the school and the workplace, which has had over 100 signups, which include Dove, Santander, NatWest, and other groups in over 500 schools in the UK. Making sure that people are saying you cannot discriminate against black hair, it's our body, you cannot tell us we cannot wear it. And through working with these young people, one of the things I've really discovered is that when you teach young people how to talk about the problems they are living and give them the tools and resources, they can go so incredibly far. And so it's incredibly fun to see Liv here doing this amazing work. And honestly, all of them are going to take my job in the next 2 years, and probably all of yours. I'm incredibly honored to work with all the young people I do, and I'm incredibly honored to be here today and eventually getting to see Liv speak with Reverend Al Sharpton. And I just want to say that we're currently in the process of recruiting our next cycle of young people. So if there's a school in South London that you think needs us, come talk to me afterwards and we will come to that school. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is Yolanda. Do you want me to stand up? Because I'm doing a poem. I know some of you guys can't. Should I stand? I was hoping you say no.
Please stand, please stand.
Cool, cool. So my name is Yolanda. I am, I guess, a young activist in Hackney. I am a project lead for a group called Account Hackney, which is a police scrutiny group. We've kind of strayed away from cussing out the police because it's just not worth it anymore. And we do more strategic using music, using films, educating young people about their rights as well. But today, I'm coming to you as a poet, not a poem. I'm going to share 2 poems with you. The first one is called Hackney Ain't Innocent. And just to give a little background on this poem, I wrote this off the back of the George Floyd murder in America. And my reasons for writing it is because, like mentioned earlier, when things happen like George Floyd's murder, in a country like the UK, we are so quick to rally up and to protest. And don't get me wrong, that's amazing. But we don't do it for the people that get killed in the UK by the hands of the police. But this poem here is solely focused on those that have been killed by the hands of the police within Hackney. So as I said, it's called Hackney Ain't Innocent. Hackney ain't innocent. There's blood on the streets from the hands of the police. Remember the name? Rashawn Charles. He was killed in 2017. His family still weeps. But coolly, the officers were just doing their job. Nah, man. The brother couldn't breathe. This one's close to home. Really broke Hackney. Still no justice. Officer walked free. There's a murderer out on the streets and he's still patrolling Hackney. How can we feel safe? Who's gonna protect us? My prayers goes out to his family. We must never forget his name. So say his name. Rashawn Charles. Say his name. Rashawn Charles. Rest in peace. Maddest thing is, he ain't the first. In 2002, we were saying R.I.P. Kwame, another death in custody, and it's the same old story. He died of natural causes. But when he asked for your help, officers refused. They thought he was faking it. Though he was constantly collapsing, moving round in agony, he should have lived. He had a 90% chance. But they show you neglect when your skin color's dark. Kwame, rest in peace. My prayers are with your family. 1994, that's the year of my birth. But right before Christmas, the feds left Hackney hurt. That's another family crying, another brother dying, an unlawful killing as he struggled for his life. Say his name, Oluwaseji. Say his name, Oluwaseji. In 1998, there was still no justice for his family. My prayers are with them as the officers were let free. But hold on, wait. Ain't the police meant to serve and protect? So what happened to Vandana? Is that a case of neglect? In 1991, she sought refuge in your station. Escaping from her boyfriend who used her body as a target. She pleaded for your protection. She didn't want him in that meeting, but you let him in anyway. And he stabbed her to death. She was only 21. She should have had a lot of life left. I'm sorry, officer, but what is your job again? Because it can't be to serve and protect. And as we remember their names, let's remember the families because nothing makes sense when we're trying to comprehend these tragedies. And in 1983, Hackney said R.I.P. to a brother named Colin Roach. Died from a gunshot in the entrance of a police station. Coroner's jury deemed it suicide. Typical. I'm starting to think suicide means we did it when it comes to the police. Because the amount of suicides in their station, I swear it deserves an investigation. See, Colin Roach was only 21. His family deserves some justice, man. Do you really want me to believe that a black man could walk down the streets of Hackney in 1983 with a bag and a shotgun and not get stopped by no one, only to make it to the station and then turn around and commit suicide? You would have an easier job convincing me that I'm actually white than me ever believing that lie. And since that will never happen, I know for a fact that Colin Roach did not commit suicide. See, Hackney ain't innocent. There's blood on the streets from the hands of the police. And there's some names I didn't even mention, like Vincent Graham, Tune Hassan, Michael Ferreira. All these names and no officers charged. Still no justice for their families. My prayers are large because it don't take a bullet to break someone's heart. Rest in peace to the fallen. Hackney ain't innocent. There's blood on the streets from the hands of the police. Thank you.
Amazing, Yolanda. Thank you. Amazing.
So I've got one more to share with you guys. And this one is called Why Do You Fear Us? I don't remember the reason I wrote this, but it kind of self-inspired. Once I get into it, I wrote this, I think, when I was about 16 or 17, just to give you a little bit of background on it. Why do you fear us? Is it the darker shades of our skin or the way our hair flows in the wind? Tell me. Tell me, is it danger we bring? Or is it 'cause my sisters were queens and my brothers kings? So in our blood be royalty? Or do you fear us? Fear us because my people pose a knowledge that you do not understand, and you're afraid that one day we might raise a revolution. Or are you scared? Scared because my people can create leaders, even though most of our life we are taught to follow. I still do not understand why your love for us can be so narrow. You see, when I was in school, my teacher told me that we're all equal. But somewhere along the line, the enemies changed the mindset of some. Now you believe that you're the more superior one. But when we stand up and fight for what we know is wrong, I see the fear in your eyes, but why? Why do you fear us? Is it because of my people's ability to rise each time you try to break us in our strive? It's got me asking, what is the difference between you and I? I mean, if you strip us of our colors, we're both alike, right? So why? Why do you fear us? Is it because we don't flinch when you're near us regardless of our history? Or because of our history, you know we will switch eventually? Or is it because you know we can switch from Martin to Malcolm in a split second and you won't even see it coming? Is that why you fear us? Or is it because we show love when you show hate and that leaves you in a confused mind state? Now, I don't want you to make the mistake and think I'm talking about your whole entire race, because I ain't. I know some of you are great. But to the ones you ain't, I ask you why? Why do you fear us? Is it the darker shades of our skin or the way our hair flows in the wind? Tell me. Tell me, is it danger we bring? Or is it because you know without us your empire would sink? Or is it because you're afraid that one day my people will wake up and realize that you've only replaced those chains with all those rings, blings and materialistic things, and soon they will see that they are kings, queens, and they won't stand for none of these things? Is that why you fear us? Or is it because my people pose the knowledge that you do not understand, and you're afraid that one day we will raise a revolution? Or are you scared? Scared because my people can create leaders, even though most of our life we are taught to follow. I still do not understand why the love for us can be so narrow. Or is it because of the darker shades of our skin or the way our hair flows in the wind? Tell me, is it danger we bring? I got to question that look that you give when you see a black man in a group of more than 3. I'm no longer surprised when they're circled by the police, like it's only a criminal you see. And I see 3, and all they want is just to be free. I mean, all we want is just to be free, just to be seen, recognized and rewarded. In fact, we just want peace, just leave us be. But in 2023, I'm still asking why. Why do you fear us? Why do you feel the need to pinch your purse when you're near us? Just because we're loud doesn't mean we're terrors. We're expressive with our words because it comes from the heart. So why? Why do you fear us? Is it because of how many years you've been trying to break us, but resilience is in our veins, Resilience is in our veins, so we brush it off like it doesn't faze us. But it does. Though you can't recognize the signs, you call us hard to reach, aggressive, loud and violent. Have you ever stopped to think that maybe we're just hurting? Generational curses are real because for generations my people haven't healed, so I ask you why? Why do you fear us? You love us for our entertainment. Our culture you love to indulge in, yet still the playing field is uneven. Is it because of the darker shades of our skin? Or the way our hair flows in the wind? Tell me, is it danger we bring? And now they got a new term, adultification. where they claim to see our younger children as older than they are, like they don't know the difference. We're all the same in their eyes, but if they really saw us, they would see the pain in our eyes. So I ask you, why? Why do you fear us? And that's it.
Wow. Deep, deep, deep. Thank you, Yolanda. Thank you, Yolanda. What an amazing set of poems. Can we have a big round of applause for Foppe and Yolanda, please? Come on. Let's hear that. Foppe, thank you very much. So, we're just going to rearrange the seats slightly. Guys, you want to grab a sofa together? I'm just going to introduce, I mentioned the IDPAD Centre, which is the building you're in, which is a centre for us as African heritage people, but the chair of IDPAD is here and would like to say a few words, and he's actually going to introduce the main man himself. I'm going to hand over to Viv Amoon. Give him a big round of applause. Viv.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to our new home in Hackney, the Black African Impact Hub. Raise the roof for me, please. Let me hear you. Let me hear you raise the roof. We're going to be having powerful speakers come into this space on a regular basis in order to help us facilitate the process of healing, wealth creation, forgiving, and coming together so that we can build going forwards. Can you imagine this Hackney with all of the black people didn't have its own space? So we schemed and we plotted during lockdown to take off. You know, people know this building for the LED to come and charge their meter. It was laying empty and we've taken it over. And we wanted to bring you in here before we've done anything to it. Still got the predecessors, computers and so on in here. We want to revision the space, all right? So that Hackney has something that is proud of, that we don't allow to be gentrified, so that we can bring our heroes and our sheroes into this space in order for us to draw on their energy and bring forth the next generation of leaders. So as I've said, Jake said, my name is Viv Amoon. I'm the chair for now. I'm looking forward to handing it over to the next generation of leaders once we've done our work in this building. We don't want this brick and mortar to stand in isolation. We want it to be connected with other brick and mortar black African hubs all over the UK and all over the globe. It's one of the conversations that we've been having with the National Action Network, which is Reverend Al Sharpton's organization. And he has a vision that we share, which is that we begin to connect meaningfully and intentionally across the planet. And it's crazy for us that it took the pandemic, where we were pushed back into physical captivity, locked in our rooms, for us to begin through Zoom and chat, whatever it's called, to connect with our brothers and sisters all over the planet. And then we promised ourselves that we wouldn't go back to our daily lives once we were let out, once again, that we would continue to bond and engage. So please, the first massive, big mouth speaker for the hub in Hackney, Reverend Al Sharpton. Please give him a round of applause. I can't hear you, stand up. Give him a round of applause. He wasn't willing to get on the plane before he came to Hackney. Let me hear you one more time. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm very happy to be here because I think in his introduction is correct. We have a responsibility to talk to each other across the Atlantic about each other so that others don't interpret us to each other for ourselves. And I think that what I have come to learn about what you do here is so important, because there is a difference between having stable, long-term organizations that prepare the generations to come so that we have continuity than anything that I can see. One of the things that we must stop doing is trying to reinvent the wheel every generation. And we're fighting against forces that pass it on from generation to generation. There is a reason that they have a royalty that goes from generation to generation. They get, I'm sure they have their disagreements, but other than, I guess, Harry, they keep that in the palace. We get disagreements, and we tear up organizations and structures and then wonder why we don't make advancements. All of us do not do the same thing, but all of us ought to support the whole of establishing what is equal and fair and just for our people. So the constant thing that we've had to deal with in the States is saying that there has never been a time in the struggle where we had one thing work for everybody. It was always that people played a different role that complemented the whole. When I was growing up in the 60s, we had Adam Clayton Powell in the Congress. We had Shirley Chisholm in the North in the Congress. We had Thurgood Marshall in the courts. We had Martin Luther King in the South. We had Malcolm X in the North. We had Black Panthers. We had nonviolence, all at the same time. And that's what moved us forward. And this before you had Twitter, TikTok, social media, cell phones, any of that. On rotary phones and a telegraph machine, they made the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, took us from the back of the bus all the way to the front of city halls at that time. Here we are in the 21st century with 150 different cable channels, all kinds of social media, 50 different ways to communicate, and we act like can't one Negro talk at a time. We cannot become our own worst enemies. So if there are some that are in the corporate world, let them do what they can do for the whole. If there's some in politics, let them do what they can do for the whole. If there's some in the streets, good. You talk into those in the suites. As long as we're on the same program, the people we are fighting fight at multidimensional levels. And we are smart enough and talented enough to do the same. When we talk about Africa, there were always different tribes in Africa. You know, people talk about Africa like it's a country. It's a continent. And it is different tribes, but it makes up nations. We must have the same ability to have the multiplicity of our acts. So I grew up a minister, but I work with atheists because you don't have to be a clone of mine in order for me to work with you. So I don't care where our expression comes from, whether we are women, men, whether we are gay, all of that makes the whole of a movement if we're moving forward. The reason there is inequality in the UK is not based on whatever your type of blackness is, it's based on blackness. So if you look at the fact that even in the pandemic, the stopping and searching of blacks and dealing with blacks went up 24% in the UK, then we need to be discussing how we had to deal with stop and search, and you stop and search in the UK, how we had to deal with stop and frisk in the States. Same thing, because the assumption is that we're automatically suspects. We've found 82% of the blacks they stopped in New York alone never did anything wrong, didn't have a gun, didn't have anything wrong. Why were you not doing it in the white community? Because of an innate racism. And it was so bad that now we even find where blacks in law enforcement operate in a racist way. Last Thursday, I'm not talking history, last Wednesday, I preached the funeral of this young man killed in Memphis, Tennessee. This last week. Here, the thing that hurt me, I started in the movement when I was 12 years old. And my mother brought me to the ministers because I was a boy preacher. And the minister said, well, we know what to do. And they brought me to Martin Luther King's representative in New York, Reverend William Jones. He introduced me to Jesse Jackson, and I became their youth director. I grew up in that part of the movement. So when I got to Memphis last week to do the funeral, usually when I go to Memphis, I go by the Lorraine Motel. The Lorraine Motel was the place Martin Luther King was staying at when he was killed. Walked out on the balcony on his way to dinner at Reverend Billy Kyle's house, man blew his brains out. The thing that bothered me when I went to the hotel this time, because this is just because I grew up in that tradition, I went by, pay my respects, is it occurred to me that less than 10 minutes away from Martin Luther King, where he died, these 5 black cops beat this unarmed brother to death. Martin Luther King died in Memphis marching for city workers. These 5 black guys would not have been on the police squad if it wasn't for Dr. King. So let me get this right. Dr. King dies to put you on the force so you can beat us like others was beating us? You didn't get there because of your qualifications. Yes, you were qualified. You got there because somebody made your qualifications matter. I was debating a self-described black conservative about 3-4 years ago. Y'all got a bunch of them here. I heard a couple of y'all grunting. Y'all got some blacks whose theory is there is no racism right here in the UK. And we got a debate one night, and he said to me, Reverend Al, you don't understand. I see you out there marching and protesting and doing whatever. This was a couple of years ago. We were dealing with George Floyd, who I also did his funeral and did the marches. He says, you don't understand. Marching civil rights didn't make me. I went to the right schools. I'm a member of the right fraternities. I know the right people. Look at my resume. Civil rights didn't make my resume. And he handed it to me, and his part of the crowd clapped. And I took it, I looked at it, I said, it's very impressive. You went to the right schools. You're a member of the right fraternities. You have the right people here as reference. And you're right. Civil rights didn't write your resume. But civil rights made somebody read your resume. You are not the first qualified black in the country, but it took some uneducated people that had no membership to fraternities, who had no references, that put the pressure in the streets to make people open the doors for you. And if we understand that we open the doors so you would come back and serve the people that fought to open the doors for you, we can move forward. We are not each other's enemies. So rather than our build resentment for each other or look down on those that we think that are not as gifted as each other, those you looking down are the ones that's holding you up. And the ones you're looking up to is the ones you're holding up. So if we're connected, you know they have the saying about crabs in the barrel crawling over each other. The way you stop crabs in the barrel from crawling over each other is you have a crab meeting and decide to take the lid off the barrel. And if you take the lid off the barrel, there's enough room for all the crabs. Our problem is we've let them convince us the lid has to stay there. That's how they keep us in control. So they got the old versus the young. Like I tell young people all the time, that every day you wake up, you're getting older. Don't glorify being young, use it. And don't glorify being old, because a lot of old folk got old doing nothing. And then there are some that got old doing things. We need each other. And the way they played us against each other is our difference. Light skin. I remember when I was growing up, I want a light-skinned girlfriend. Well, what light skin means that whites were more in your family. So all of our differences, we must be able to say, how do we turn them into a harmonious movement of empowerment? Lastly, one of the things that I like about BO that's working with those that are trying to deal with this voting question. Everything that we are seeking has some political equation that we have to answer. I do a syndicated national radio show that I'm going to jump on when I finish here, back in the States. A guy called me about 6 months ago and said, Reverend, I understand all this stuff that you're talking about voting, but I don't want to have nothing to do with politics. I just want my reparations. I said, I believe in reparations too. I said, but let me ask you something. If we don't vote, who's going to pay us the reparations? He said, well, the government. I said, but if we don't decide who's in the government, you think we going to elect people against reparations and they go pay us? I mean, what are you talking about? You cannot have no power in government and expect government to do something for you. Well, I just want them to quit beating us up. Then we need to be in charge of who's doing the beating. Well, I just want to make money. Then you've got to deal with government. Government regulates business. I got guys in Harlem. I want to open up a store. Well, you got to go down and first get a business certificate. That is at the city council. They are elected. I don't care what you do. It's around voting. And if somebody has got to beg you to help yourself, they don't have the problem. You have a problem. Because everything you do, the price of gas, if you don't have a car, the price of getting on a train, all of that is by government. You at least ought to make the decision of who's in government. I had friends talk about, I'm not in the system. No, you in the system, you just decided not to empower yourself. And as they got older, one guy was, I'm a revolutionary, I'm believing this, that, and the other, came to my office about 2 weeks ago and said, I need to see Rev Al. He says, well, you know, we take care. No, I need to see, I know him personally. I came out, I said, no, yeah, I know him, come on in. He said, I need some help. I said, what do you need help on? They messed with my Social Security check. I said, but I thought you wasn't in the system. How you on Social Security and you ain't in the system? So let us stop finding ways to differ and find ways to unite, because the blood that binds us are thicker than the waters that divide us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for being here today. I think, like, as a young person, the way we're taught about the civil rights movement, and it's a deliberate construction of the narrative, they teach us that it's some distant, faraway history that is relegated to the books that no one will ever read. But you coming here today, I think, is really proof that we still have the capacity to be part of shaping this history for the future.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Athian said. Thank you so much for speaking to us. That was a really powerful speech. We know that you have a long history of partnership and solidarity with the UK, a relationship, in fact, which spans over 30 years, which is older than both of us here, supporting grassroots struggles and miscarriages of justice, i.e. Stephen Lawrence, Cardiff Free, Roland Adams. And on that note...
my question is essentially that you've demonstrated that you have an interest in continually interacting on a grassroots level with the UK. And we're witnessing kind of several dualities between the US and the UK right now. There are societies that are caught in moments of crisis and reimagination and all these other things. Why do you think that this relationship, why do you keep on revisiting it? And what do you think we can learn from this interconnection?
I think that the reason that we need to revisit it is we strengthen each other. Why does President Biden deal with your prime minister? Why do they have NATO meetings? Why do they have G7 meetings? Because they exchange commerce, they exchange economic empowerment, they establish trade. If they can deal with that, then we need to deal with that, because we're fighting those that have a common economic bond that exclude us or don't treat us as equal. And like I said in my statement, I can talk about stop and frisk, you can talk about the stop and search, and we learn from each other's strategies on what works to stop it, because the same mentality that suppresses and oppresses in the UK is what happens in the United States.
I'm really, really glad you said that, because obviously there are people that believe that racism doesn't exist in the UK, or that it's completely different to that of the US. But I really love that you said the same powers that are oppressing you there are the same powers that are oppressing us here. The idea that that's not the truth is a white supremacist notion in itself. So thank you for saying that. Our next question is, you speak about at length young people. You even spoke about it just now, about how we shouldn't glamorize necessarily being young or being old. We have so much to learn from each other, and we're one and the same people, right? We know that you're deeply committed to building continued intergenerational partnership. So why do you think that that's important? If you could go into a bit more depth, and in what tangible ways can we keep passing the baton on?
I think that it is important, any serious organizers or serious leaders must develop strong ties with young people, because it's something very basic. You're not going to live forever. And we cannot keep building structures that are built around personalities and not built around organizations. Personalities with charisma ought to use that to build something that outlasts them. So I grew up mentored by the generation ahead of me. Jesse Jackson made me a youth director, and he was 13, 14 years older than me. I have a strong youth department that they're not even waiting on me to get off the scene. They're doing their own things, because movements is about continuity. That's why you getting ready to coronate a new king of England. They keep that bloodline going, they keep that monarchy going, and that business going. We need to be able to have structures that encourage young people. And young people should not be encouraged to be clones of the people that mentored them. My way of doing things and my style was different than the generation ahead of me. What I liked was different. The young people behind me, what they like is different. It's not about imitating your mentors. It's about emulating the principles and the need for empowerment. And that should go from generation to generation.
Yeah, I've got one. Could you share maybe like a personal anecdote or something that, like something specific that some of the young people coming behind you have taught you?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things they taught me was that there can be gatherings that you can communicate without just having solo speakers. You know, I grew up in a church, and, you know, the choir was singing, the preacher acted like God just told him something in the office. And they taught me that a collective energy was something that can be effective in organizing. They taught me how you can deal with various types of people that choose different lifestyles but are still committed to the cause of our people. So they are more open, they are more free, and they can communicate in different ways. I grew up at a time where we had just started seeing social media. Now you've got all kinds of things. So you have young people in my organization that had to teach me how to deal with TikTok and all that. I thought it was something to have a radio show. I got folks in my organization that never turn a radio or TV on. It's all in their hand. So you will not be able to communicate if you're not up with what's going on right now. And I think that's the beauty and the power of young people if it's properly channeled by them, because they know how to talk to each other in ways that we wouldn't know.
I really love that you said it's channeled and powered by them. I think that speaks something really important, which is that you need youth-led, you need young people's voices
That's
at
right.
the front. Yeah, so thank you very much. Athian has a question for you.
Yeah, kind of going in the same direction as your question. someone who, I think, like, the way that each generation evaluates themselves is by their relationship with really important figures. And someone who is one of the most scrutinized figures on the planet, President Obama, is someone who my generation has a particularly interesting relationship with, because we both saw elements of the things that brought him into power, but some of the limitations of his presidency. And we're increasingly we're a generation with a sense of moral clarity, but we're working out how to apply that. In terms of, obviously you have a very close relationship with the president. In terms of looking on to the next generation and your interaction in that moment, what do you think are some of the potentials and limitations of formal political power?
I think the potential is that we can have more power over the daily things that we have to deal with in life. Like I said, how we deal with business, how we deal with jobs, how we deal with criminal justice system, to empower ourselves more to have control over the things that decide our life. The limitations are that as we build certain political power and economic power, they will fight back. So, for example, when Barack Obama was running for president, and he had come and sat with me, and we talked, and I said I was going to help him, and I wanted to support him. And people thought I was going to go with Hillary Clinton because she was a senator from my state. And a lot of people around me said, you committed suicide, he's not going to win. I said, but if he loses, it won't be because of me. He got in. He got in. People started saying in the white media, why is he dealing with a civil rights guy like Al Sharpton? Al Sharpton's controversial. 6 months later, they was asking him, where's your birth certificate? You weren't born in the States, you were born in Kenya. And I would tease them. I said, I thought I was controversial. They don't ask me where my birth certificate is. The limitations are, the more you get in power, the more they're gonna come after you. And the less you cut yourself off from your base, the more vulnerable you are for them to get you. He was smart to keep his base because we were the only ones that would fight him. Imagine a man born in Hawaii, raised by a mother who was white, and they were going to ask him to prove he was born here. He's the president of the United States. They'd never ask any president that. So the limitation is they will still have bias. I don't have to use Barack as an example. A lot of people thought Meghan Markle was going to be treated like the royal family, right? I don't have to finish that sentence. So, I mean, so the limitations are, they are always going to set impediments there. The determination is if you're loyal to who you are and don't forget who you are and therefore communicate who you are and be with your own, you will be able to push the envelope further. You will always have limitations, but every generation need to push the bar further.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sitting down with us and for answering our quick fireside chat questions. We want to make sure as many people in the room get to ask their questions. So we had some that was submitted earlier. Is there a roving mic? Okay. Do we have Abdurrahman Hassan in the room?
Abdi, where is he? Abdi? Nope. I thought he was here. Sorry. Yep.
Can you remote? Okay. Yeah. Was there an event or person that has shifted in how you sharpen a leader in recent years? So can you think of an event or person that has shifted you as a leader, how you sharpen?
Oh, in the last several years?
Yeah.
Yeah, about, I would say a person that helped shift me was Mrs. Coretta Scott King, the widow of Martin Luther King. When I was younger and we would do a lot of things that we just didn't care, she sat me down and she said, Al, you've developed an organization. You have people that's paying attention. you need to take seriously what you're doing. Weigh your words and weigh your actions because you're representing us. Now, a lot of people say that to me, and I would know, you don't know what you're talking about. This is Martin Luther King's wife. And if she felt the need that she felt there was some value in me, it helped me to really say, they taking me seriously. And I started kind of acting in a way that was different. And she didn't do it where she was condemning me. She was correcting me without me feeling like she was correcting me. And Mrs. King had a big impact on my maturity.
Thank you. Do we have Simone in the audience? Simone? No? April, I do know, is here. Where are you? April, right next to me.
Hi, Rev Sharpton. My name is April Amai, and I'm a barrister here on behalf of the Society of Black Lawyers. I actually have two questions, very quick ones. But the first one is actually in relation to the tragic killing of Tyree Nichols. Going back to the death of George Floyd, I conducted several webinars educating people about racism, Jim Crow laws, and slavery. And I had a few people who were not black and said to me, well, that's a US problem. What does that have to do with the UK? What does that have to do with Ireland? So what would be your response to that, to people here in the UK and Europe who want to raise awareness of these unlawful killings in the US? What would you respond to that?
I would say that the fact that George Floyd was a victim of a policeman putting his knee on his neck, and obviously the policeman felt he could get away with that with a black man. And the same with this case where these black guys, 5 black cops did this, they would not have done that to a white kid in Memphis. What does it have to do with blacks in the UK? The same thing is when you see whites in an emergency, whether it's a hurricane or a volcano or an earthquake. You don't see white people in England say, what that got to do with us? They run to the rescue because they understand that if you're going to deal with issues that could happen to them, then they're going to try to stop it and contain it and help where it is. Every black in UK should look at the video of George Floyd or of the case that you're looking at now and say that could be me based on stop and search. You're just one cop away from being the same thing. The evidence of that is, first time I came to England, is they killed a young boy named Roland Adams just for being black. And to prove that it was racism, when we marched, it's 1991, Lee Jasper invited me here along with who is now the Lord, Simon Booley. And we marched in protest, just like I marched in the States you see on the news. We marched right here about the killing of Roland Adams. Whites came out and waved bananas at us. And I said to Simon, what are they waving bananas? He said, because they're calling us monkeys. I'm not talking about in Selma, Alabama. I'm talking about right here in London. Now his aunt is in the House of Lords. So the same identity they have, which is why I said they have NATO meetings, G7 meetings, we need to have. Yeah. And we need to know each other, and we need to communicate with each other, because that's what they do. I believe me, when the King Charles, who was Prince Charles, is coronated in a few weeks, you're going to see heads of states from all over the world because they celebrate each other. We need to have that same capacity.
Wow. I've got a question here from Ngozi from Sister Space.
Good afternoon, good evening. Reverend, I am so glad to see you. My name is Ngozi Fulani. I also was raised up in a time where there was no computers. So the other day, I put something on Twitter, and my life changed.
Really?
It really did, right? The palace stuff. So my question to you, and I'm really pleased to meet you, is what advice do you have for us, the women in the struggle? And a part two of that question is, how do we maintain who we are without apology?
I think that the strength of our struggles have always been our women. And the backbone of our struggles have always been our women. And, you know, I was youth director of Shirley Chisholm's campaign, who was the first black woman to go to Congress. When I was 18 years old, she ran for president. And a lot of black men used to try to push her back, and she was strong enough to keep going forward. And she said something to me that I never forgot. I was 18 years old. She says, if a black woman has to step back for you to feel like you're a strong black man, then you're not a man anyway. A man is not... A man is not challenged by a strong black woman, he's strengthened by one, because it was a black woman that brought him in the world. And I think that what my advice to black women is, do not allow your men to establish your place. Your place is next to him as the womb that brought him in the world. And if he is not strong enough to accept that, you either have to help make him strong enough, or you have to deal with it another way. But the black woman is not the reason black men were oppressed. They were the reason black men survived the oppression.
Okay, so from Sister Space, the organization that are struggling with this whole palace thing, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Seeing you today has lifted me in a way that I cannot tell you. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to have the last question, Reverend. Is Kimberly in the audience? Kimberly, hi. Can you remember your question? Here you go.
Yes. Thank you. Hello, I'm Kimberly Garande, and I'm a campaigner. I work for a youth charity for young migrants in the UK called We Belong. And my question is, are there challenges that you have experienced in reaching consensus amongst the communities you've campaigned with? And how have you overcome them? Because I think you touched on this earlier about all of us having, I guess, different goals for the communities that we're trying to serve. But how do you kind of deal with, you know, people having different views of like what tactics to take, or actually, well done you guys for having this law change, but we don't feel like you've gone far enough for this group within the community. How do you reach a consensus? And have you got any examples of ways you've done that?
I think that the way you reach a consensus is to first start with what is the goal, what is the objective of a given drive or campaign, and then work backwards on how do we get there. Often you find people argue more about the tactics and the differences and the styles, and never deal with how does that get to where we're trying to go. And I think if you start with what the end goal is, and then let's go back to what tactic is going to get us there, then it diffuses some of the differences. A lot of it is also giving everybody their space to work. So I've learned we've had some of the biggest marches in the last 20 years. The George Floyd, we had the big march, and I'm talking about our organization, National Action Network. We had 200,000 people in the middle of the pandemic go to Washington with us for the march. What I learned, which I didn't learn younger, is they said, all right, we're going to have a 3-hour program. I said, an hour and a half, let all of the different organizations that didn't even help us speak. He said, what do you mean? We worked hard. I said, but if we let everybody get their light, then it only brightens everybody's light. Because everybody wants, you know, Martin Luther King's famous speech of, we all have a drum major instinct, I'm a drum major for justice. He didn't say he was a member of the band. Everybody wants to have a drum major. Everybody got a little ego. Let them get their little thing off, because it doesn't matter if we're all feeding the whole. And once we understand that we are not competing with each other, we can complement each other, and you do what you do, I do what I do. I was listening as the young lady was reading the poetry, and I love poetry, and right there, you were good. You were very good. I was listening to you, not only the poetry, but your delivery was dynamic. I can't write poetry. I can preach. So you and I go on the road together and poet and preaching, we'd be a big hit. I mean, so what I'm saying is if you let everybody do what they do, it brings down a lot of things. And we could find out we really don't have as much against each other as we think we have. It's that people feel when they're inhibited that you're the enemy, when it's really both of us have been silent so long that we all want to hog the mic.
Round of applause for the Reverend, please.
Thank you, man.
Okay. Now the Reverend's got to leave very quickly. He's got a show to do. We will take a couple of pictures from the front. Where's the Deputy Mayor? Councillor Bramble. Is she in the room still? Please come to the front. We'll take 3 or 4 individuals along with you, please. Don't be backwards in coming forwards. Yeah, that's the one. Yolanda, come on, quick. We need to be quick. If you do want a picture, please just come to the... Don't be coy. Right, just behind me. Don't go from one extreme to the other. Beautiful. Show him some Hackney, London love. Beautiful. I'm being pushed out of the way now. Oh my God. I think this is going to be the best picture of the trip. Get that picture, get that camera out of his face. Oh my God. Hold on, let me grab one. 1 minute. My knees.
Hang on there. All right, hang on.
Hey, don't obscure the brother. Okay, that's it. Spaces, please. Sorry. Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't even get you out of your chairs a minute ago. That's right. London love. That's it now. Thank you. All right. Security's coming. All right. Thank you. Okay. Move now. Move. Round of applause for the Reverend, please. Yeah. If you weren't registered to come here, please leave your details at the front. We've got more events coming up over the next year. Support the IDPAD Centre. Thank you.
So before everyone dashes off, we do have a few more announcements to make. So for those who aren't getting a photo with the Reverend, I mean, it's pretty busy over there. I'd suggest waiting. But we wanted to tell you a little bit more, because tonight's been about activism, and you've heard some amazing conversations. Hopefully you've picked up something new in terms of information or made some new connections. But we've got with us tonight Martha Cuffey and Patrick Vernon. Patrick, Martha, I know the crowd is sort of dissipating, but this is always a time when we need a solid voice like yours. Can we just say, give Patrick a big round of applause, and Martha. Patrick's been on the activism scene for probably before I was born. I'm going to use that as an opportunity to try and be younger. Okay, so Patrick's going to say a few words about some work that the Black Equity Organisation is starting, or has started, and it's conversations across the country that ideally will help some of you as activists, because it's all about giving you support, trying to find out what you need. But I don't need to say any more. I'm going to hand over to Martha, who's going to try and calm the crowd and share your information.
Good evening, everyone who are in person here and virtually, wherever you are around the world. Patrick, Vernon and I have created a tag team, and we have partnered with BEO to hold a series of events in person and online to really get to know the up-and-coming... I think people are hailing the departure of Reverend Sharpton. So what we're up to is we're holding a series of events where we are interacting with people who are campaigners or who aspire to be campaigners. We are enabling you to get clearer about what you're about. We're also sharing some case studies about what has worked, what hasn't worked in terms of campaigning. We're also looking at, the healing aspect of being a leader. Lee Jasper had referenced that before, that what do we do with our trauma? It sits in our body. And that's kind of part of my specialization in leadership development, where Patrick is more focused on the campaigning side. Patrick, would you like to say some words?
Sure. So good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. So, unfortunately, I've missed a good part of today's event. I just came from Birmingham this evening, but just a couple of things just to add. As you've probably heard from all the speakers, activism is a spectrum. It's from the boardroom to the street. And my experience, I've been involved in all that kind of activism in the boardroom and in the street. And what my observations have been for a number of decades is we've not learnt the lessons of campaigning. We've not learnt the lessons of advocacy, of campaign and activism from the time that the people came in the 50s and 60s. We haven't learned the history of activism and campaigning during the 1970s, during the SUS times. We've not learned the lessons of activism during the 80s and 90s. And even today, in 2023, have we learnt the lessons? And I've been involved in a number of campaigns over the years. I've helped lots of individuals with their own campaigns, but also I've actually supported lots of people who now have become councillors and MPs over the years. And what's quite clear is we don't share enough, we don't learn enough, we don't reflect enough in terms of what we should do. We know the history of structural racism, we know the history of Afrophobia, with an I, by the way, but we've still got a lot of work to do. And one of the things that we're trying to do, working with BEO and many others, is how do we have that corporate memory? What works in campaigning, what works in activism? We also need to be mindful that we talk about the next generation, but the elders who are still active, and there's still a lot of them still active, they want to pass on, they still are learning. I've had experience of supporting people who in their 50s and 60s have become activists for the very first time. It's not just about 16-year-olds or 20-year-olds, it's actually all of us. So we're having these conversations. We want your support. We want to find out what you need. We want to find out what sort of stuff BEO should be campaigning about. But more importantly, we want to find out how do we have a sustainable history of campaigning. I was lucky and privileged to go to America last year for nearly a whole month on behalf of the US government. I went to some of the places that Reverend Al Sharpton talked about, learned about the history of activism in the Deep South. Yeah? And changed the mic. You can't hear me?
Is this one better? Yeah.
You mean you missed all what I just said in the last 10 minutes? No, I'm just joking.
Let me talk about the dates. So this Saturday, we're going to be in Manchester. So we're holding a workshop in Manchester on Saturday the 11th. Our next online event is on the 16th of February, and there's another one on the 9th of March. So please sign up, come see us, and we'll direct you to where you need to sign up to register for one of these events. We'd love to see you there, because we also have to learn to be leaderful. That's what he spoke about tonight, about this collective energy. So we're not just looking at the one Messiah leader. We all have leadership within us, and we have to develop that and not just rely on one person. So my premise is you are the leader that you've been looking for, but we need encouragement, we need healing, we need precision in what we're about, we need clarity about our mission. And hopefully this is an example of an event hosted by BEO of how your roots can go deeper into the soil about what you stand for. There'll be many storms in your life, but if your roots are deep and strong, you can weather the storms, you can weather the broken branches. So I really look forward to meeting some of you at our events. And is there a question? Yeah, we can share the link in the 16th event, yeah.
I think that's all, folks. So please check on the BEO website, social media platforms as well. Thank you.
Sorry, Patrick and Martha, that must have been really difficult with all the noise and excitement about Rev Sharpton. I'm very excited about the Campaign Academy, and I hope many of you are. So, look out on the BEO socials. We're going to be telling you, giving you updates about how the Academy is developing. Weirdly, we've actually finished early. Now, you, the crowd who are being attentive, good classmates, let's say, you've got the opportunity of deciding if you want to carry on the debate, which I'm more than happy to do, or if you'd like to network, mingle, we can play some music. What's it going to be? Do people want to stick around and continue the debate, or would people rather network? People want to mingle. We've got mingle over here. Do we have any takers for carrying on the conversation? No? Okay, so without further ado, I'd just like to invite our final speaker of the evening, who's going to speak briefly about the work of the Black Equity Organisation, one of the hosts tonight. So tonight's been hosted by the Black Equity Organisation, the Alliance for Police Accountability, and of course the Advocacy Academy, and you heard from Foppe earlier. So some of you will know that BEO is only, Nicola, how old are we? We were born in May of last year, so we're not even a full year old. But we've had a number of changes in leadership, all for the best. And I want to introduce now the new incoming CEO of the Black Equity Organisation, Vanda. Vanda, are you here? Can you join us, please? Vanda, can you come and join us, please? So, Vanda, thank you. You're going to say a few words just to bring this to a close, or I'll help you with that.
Thanks, Jake. This really has been sprung on me, and following Al Sharpton, I mean, that's just got to be the worst job in the world, hasn't it? But what I'd really like to say is that this has been a really great turnout. We have had such fantastic events that I'm absolutely honoured and humbled to be taking on the role of Chief Executive at the Black Equity Organisation. This is a job at which is all of my dreams come true, but it's come true through all of the nightmares that we've all been through. And all I can say is that the real strength of BEO is in bringing everyone together at events like this, and there'll be many more of that. We're launching a campaign academy, we'll be doing strategic litigation, and what we really want to do is to support everybody in their work. We're not here to come along and say, we're a big new organisation and we're going to take control of everything. We are standing on the shoulders of giants, and we want to support and help. And where there isn't the funding, we want to take on those difficult things. We want to support you because our communities are like a mosaic. We're all different, as Al said. We all have our ways of supporting and of activism and of supporting our communities and supporting each other. So the most important thing is that we bring ourselves together, that we bring the organisations together, and that we are here to support and help. And also, we're here to listen. So if we're getting it wrong, let us know. And let us know what we can do to support you. And this is just one of this is one of many, many events that we hope we'll see you at. So I hope that you've enjoyed this evening. And what I'd like to say is that, you know, we will definitely be holding more events, but what we want to have is really a celebration event as well, because we need to come together and have a bit of black joy as well. So I'm going to leave you with the thought of black joy. So let's celebrate that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vanda. So we're going to bring tonight to a close. Can I just say a few final thank yous? A big thank you to all the volunteers that helped put this on, to the team that worked with me on organising this, JK particularly, all the guys in press that helped to make sure that Reverend Al Sharpton was heard by as many people as possible across our media. Big thank you to Volunteering Matters, who actually own this building, and some of their colleagues are here today. They've actually allowed us to use this building at virtually no cost. And hopefully, you know, we'll see this building evolve as an important centre, not just in Hackney, but in the UK, because we have so few places that are actually built by us for us. So I want to wish you all a really safe journey home. Please do stay around for 20, 15 minutes or so, mingle, make some new friends, make some new connections. Can I say a big thank you to you all, and good night. Thank you.
Gonna pull if they come back home too soon.